Ladies and gentlemen, now in today's video, we're going to be breaking down everything that you need to know to get Uncollected in 2020. So I'm going to be talking about pre-requirements, how to get set up and get prepared to go for Uncollected, and then we're going to be working our way through all of the 5.1 and 5.2 quests and talking about the easiest paths, some challenges that you face, and just kind of going through everything so that you're fully prepared to get to and defeat the Collector. So before we get into some of that stuff, let's talk about the pre-requirements. So these are my suggested pre-requirements before going for Uncollected, and the first one is you have a solid basic mastery setup, and by this I mean you've got points in precision and cruelty in the offense tree to increase your crit chance and crit damage. You also have 4 points in block proficiency to get 800 more block proficiency, and this is very, very important to make sure you don't get chipped down heavily when progressing. And finally, you've got points in parry and also dexterity as well, so that you can parry and evade opponents. Very essential masteries there. Now, the second thing is that you have a good understanding of how to parry, how to evade, how to bait out opponents' special attacks, how to bait out heavy attacks, and this is really important and very useful for stuff like Masochism that you'll face later, and also just how the combo system works. So if you have a good grasp on this game, like getting Uncollected isn't going to be so bad. But this is the point: if you kind of don't really understand what's going on with the combat in Marvel Contest of Champions, if you don't learn all of this stuff before going into Act 5, you're going to get your ass handed to you. So you've got to be prepared, man. You've got to be ready for this stuff. And again, there are so many great tutorials on YouTube. We got a few on this channel, but also Dork Lessons, also known as Dave, has many great guides on how to actually play Marvel Contest of Champions. So now is a great time to research if you don't already have a great understanding. Now, the next recommendation is that you ideally have at least 3 4-star champions at rank 4 level 40 with some pretty good damage output. Ideally, if we're going off my tier list, you want champions that are high demigod tier or above in terms of their tier list ranking for very rough guidance. So any month you can type in like, like March Seatin's tier list, and it will come up with a massive list of how I value every champion in the game. So as long as you have at least kind of like 3 characters, or maybe even like 1 or 2 really, really good, like beyond god tier champions, you can make that push for Uncollected. So just as a bit of a heads up, but that's kind of the bare minimum that I suggest for most players, is that you have 3 champions of 4-star rank 4 that I consider high demigod tier or above that deal some pretty good damage output. Now, next up, you want to have some 20% attack and health champion boosters saved up. You can get these at the start of every week in Alliance quest, so if you're in an Alliance, you would have been raking these in anyway, and Act 5 is the perfect time to use them. However, you want to ideally save them for kind of the later point of Act 5 Chapter 2, because that's when you're going to need them the most. So some of the earlier stuff you don't need the boosters for, but again, if you have more, if you've brought more from some of the bundles or offers, they're great to pop to your heart's content if you need them for absolutely everything. However, you probably really need them, especially if you're going in with 4-star rank 4s toward the end of Act 5 Chapter 2. So just keep that in mind for some of the problems that are going to come ahead. And also, ideally for the Collector as well, you want to have 1,000 plus units saved up. You might not need these 1,000 units. You might only use kind of 200 to 400. However, you don't want to be stuck at the Collector, because he is a very menacing, very annoying fight to this day, and he's just a pain to get down the first time. So ideally 1,000 units is a bit of a safety buffer for when you go into the Collector. The other chapters, you can take them like 1 quest at a time, but for the Collector specifically, when you do get there, make sure you ideally have 1,000 units saved up if it is your first time going against this man. So now we've talked about all the suggested pre-requirements, we're going to talk about the big problems as we get to them, but again, it's toward the end of Act 5 Chapter 2, because a lot of the earlier stuff is a bit of a warm-up for getting to some of that later stuff, because the final 3 quests, you've got to get through 12 quests to get to and defeat the Collector, because he is at the very end of Act 5 Chapter 2, and doing so is going to get you that Uncollected title. So starting in Act 5, we've got Chapter 1 here. So we got the Kang chapter, and this starts off with a node called Flare, which initially seems a little bit crazy, but it's actually a really good node because it makes the fights incredibly fast here. So basically, the opponent gains 300% attack, so you gain 300% attack, but you're going to degenerate 100% of your maximum health over 60 seconds. This essentially means that you're dealing crazy damage. You're hitting like a freight train, but also you're going to be constantly degenerating. So you want to play very, very aggressively, just smack into the opponent and try and get them down as quickly as possible. Now, the easiest suggested path, if you've kind of mastered the parry mastery, is to go left hand side for guillotine and then go on to Gambit, Moon Knight, Rogue, all pretty straightforward easy fights there. And then you've got Spider-Man. Now if you can parry this dude, you can just do like 3 hits and never trigger his evade. So if you just do parry, 3 hits, rinse and repeat, you don't need to worry about his evade. However, if you're very scared fighting Spider-Man, you can go the left hand side and take a slightly longer path here, but you will need to fight a Nightcrawler as well, and that pretty much has the same thing as Spider-Man, plus this path is a lot longer as well, so you've got even more fights where you can degenerate there. So ideally, if you can get Spider-Man down, then you can port to the final boss platform, get Falcon, Kang down, it's easy game, easy life, and again, you've got 300% attack, so the matchups are going to be very, very quick if you're playing well and you're playing aggressively, but again, this is kind of a good place to like practice as well. You can just go in if you're trying to train, see how far you can get, and just keep on playing against kind of the Act 5 AI and get used to fighting opponents in Act 5. So yeah, just practice, practice, practice here. Kind of it's a good place to start, but again, don't let the degeneration scare you too much, because it does seem a little bit scary when your health is tanking, but again, the damage is going to be absolutely massive there as well. So moving into quest number 2, we have a slightly different one when it does come to this Moon Knight. So this is, I believe, the Breakthrough Chapter here. So the opponent starts off with 5,000 armor rating, and every time you hit them, it reduces their armor rating by 200. So after 25 hits, this is kind of neutralized, and anything after that kind of gives you more and more damage, but to start off, you're not going to hit very hard. However, there's a relatively straightforward path here. So you go to the Gwen port at the start, and then if you go to the left hand side, you can go to a guillotine matchup over here, and then port over to the platform, and then you've got a pretty straightforward Captain America, not really too much of a problem. War Machine is probably the slightest annoyance on this path. He's got enhanced special too, so look out for that, and also Gambit has a little bit more power gain, but after this you can port to the Howard the Duck mini boss, and Howard the Duck, you just got to make sure you stun him. I think it's at 66 and 33% to stop his regeneration, but yeah, he's not too bad if you can stay alive. And then you've just got a Moon Knight final boss, doesn't really have anything too fancy to him, so yeah, honestly isn't too bad to deal with that one. It's a nice again, warm up for some of the stuff to come, but let's move on to the next chapter now. And the next chapter is kind of another like slightly blessing chapter if you do have kind of a good handle on the combat of this game, because it's a flare chapter. So having a look at quest number 3, you want to go in and go to the left hand side, kind of left middle there. You got Crossbones, you got Hulk Buster, like they're not too bad to fight. Crossbones can be a little bit of a pain, and then you want to go left hand side towards the Juggernaut here. So you got Ant-Man and Juggernaut, they're both like a little bit annoying. Juggernaut's a bit less annoying because again, you do have like this massive damage booster, so you just got to wait out the Unstoppable, and then after that you want to port to the middle, and then you've got some fairly straightforward matchups. You got Wolverine, pretty easy. Hulk can be annoying if you do get clipped, but as long as you don't get clipped by those special attacks, you'll be fine. Deadpool and Iron Fist, pretty straightforward there, and then you can port to the final Iron Patriot boss. So overall, that one is pretty quick and pretty easy to deal with for most players. And then we move on to quest number 4, which is one of my favorite quests in the game, man, because this one is hard to mess up too much. So this is the I think it's the life transfer chapter, that's correct. So basically you're going to suffer a permanent degeneration. However, you heal for 125% of the damage you deal to the opponent, so your regeneration is just crazy in this one. So if you go up towards Hawkeye and Daredevil and take that path, and then you want to port over to B here, and then you've got some mystery opponents. I think that's a Ronin there. Actually, it might be a Black Bolt. One of them's, I think, Ronin, and one of them's Black Bolt, but nobody's really too scary to fight on this path. I think this might be a Black Widow here, but the only annoying fight is this one. I think it's a Mesmerize Iron Patriot, so he's a 7% chance to evade and leave you stunned for 1 second. However, again, you can kind of do the same like Spider-Man tactic if you have the parry mastery under control of parry, 3 hits, rinse and repeat. You want to, you know, get your hits in that stun duration, and then he won't be able to evade out of it. Or alternately, if you have a champion that does counter evade as well, that can work. However, because the life transfer node is essentially just a massive heal, even if you do kind of you know, mess up, get stunned by that Mesmerize, you can still claw matchups like this one back, so it really isn't too bad. And then finally, you've got a Venom boss here, so just bait out Special 1. You know, there's nothing super special or challenging about this Venom, other than the fact that he is just a big version of Venom. But if you fought that Venom in Act 4 and had a pretty good time there, then you should, you know, have a fairly straightforward time. And then moving on, we've got the Electro Chapter, so this is where the difficulty starts to increase a little bit more, comparatively speaking. So this one has the Burden of Might Global. So basically, whenever you have a buff on you that expires, it just drains like a crazy amount of your power. Pretty much drains the majority of your power there. So whenever you like dash back to evade a special and trigger dexterity, or you have a champion that has a buff that expires, then it's going to drain some power. But there's a pretty straightforward path to get to the final boss, Electro, here, and you probably want to bring some champions with damage over time that can kind of attack this man without the fear of taking like too much damage. But worst case scenario, just revives and health potions are going to get that man down. So you got Kamala Khan to start off with, no nodes, and then you want to take this kind of more direct path. It may like seem harder because of the link nodes, but the link nodes, they don't really do much for the majority of these opponents, so it's just quicker to do this path and easier because you don't have to take a much longer route in comparison. So Colossus, pretty straightforward, nothing really much to worry about there. Guillotine as well, nothing really much to worry about, just don't get hit. Ronan as well, unblockable special 2, and his heavy attacks can't be interrupted. Howard the Duck, nothing really to worry about there. The Karnak is a little bit annoying because he does have strike back and also 80% physical resistance. So yeah, he can be a little bit of a grind, but just bring your strongest damage output champions when you get him down. However, he might feel like he's taking a lot less damage than a lot of other characters just because of that insane amount of physical resistance there. And then we got Dr. Voodoo, who is 200% regeneration. So at the start, he's going to heal a little bit more, but once you get into the fight, there's not really too much you need to worry about. You've got unblockable special 2 as well, but Dr. Voodoo is you know, tremendously straightforward to fight. You can just bang out the special ones, then a really easy Star-Lord, and then you've just got the Electro final boss, who has an incoming link node of, yeah, not too much you need to worry about, just kind of strike back, unblockable, special 1 there as well. So, you know, as long as you're confident evading Electro's special 1, and it's essentially, you want to do like 4 hits and then dash back and, you know, be far away from him so you don't have to evade it in close proximity, and you're pretty good there, man. So yeah, Electro, he isn't too bad to fight, but again, that is going to be a bit more difficult than some of the previous chapters. And then we have quest number 6, which is the Archangel quest. Now this one can be a bit more annoying than some of the previous ones, and probably is the most difficult of these quests to do, because you got the brute force node. So if you don't land a hit in 6 seconds, you begin to degenerate and lose 100% of your health over 30 seconds. So you basically need to make sure you're playing aggressively in order to avoid the degeneration here. Now the suggested path that I would recommend has one tricky fight on. I think all the other fights are pretty straightforward, but there is one fight that people, you know, you might struggle with a little bit here. However, it's a much shorter path than a lot of the others, and every single path that you take has some form of like annoying or challenge fight. So I suggest going for the Iron Man, and then the Quake and Daredevil, Doctor Strange, Gwenpool, and all 5 of those opponents are pretty easy to deal with. Quake can catch you off guard like a little bit, but you know, she's not really too bad in comparison to some of the worst defenders in this game. And then you want to port over to Mordo, and Mordo is probably the annoying one, the problem for a lot of people. He has an unblockable special 2. So you need to be like moderately confident at fighting Mordo. But the rules for fighting Mordo, you just never want to attack into him while he's stunned, or he's going to astral evade. Unless you have an evade counter, then you can ignore this mechanic. And yeah, just baiting out special attacks and baiting out heavy attacks is kind of the way to go there. And then we got Magneto, who is also a bit annoying. He does have an enhanced unblockable special too, so you might want to take this a bit slower and evade the special ones to make it a bit of an easier time. But yeah, Magneto, a bit of a pain there as well. Then we got Groot, who's quite straightforward to deal with. This mystery opponent is going to be a Cable here, and then finally the final boss is Archangel, who's just really straightforward to deal with. So really the boss of this chapter is the Mordo, in my opinion. Magneto is going to be a bit annoying as well, but again, the rest of that path is very quick and very easy. And yeah, make sure you don't take what is it, you can take this side as an alternate thing if you want and go for the Storm Hulkbuster. However, you need to be aware that this mystery champion right here is Iceman. So if you're going to go this way, you need to make sure that you have an Iceman counter, or he's just going to absolutely wreck you. So just keep that in mind. But maybe if you're better at fighting Iceman and have a counter, that is an alternate path. But again, you can scout out the majority of other paths. So like, if you really dread fighting Mordo, there are other options to get through that one. But now the fun begins as we move on to Chapter 2. So Chapter 2 has a global node that is present in all 6 of the quests, which you need to keep in mind for your matchups. So this node is called Role Reversal. So the class relationships on every single fight in Chapter 2 are reversed. So good is bad and bad is good. So if we're looking at a mutant champion like Psylocke, because of this reversal, you'd usually bring in, outside of this, a tech champion, because tech champions would have the advantage. But here, because they're reversed, you want to bring in a skill champion. So just remember, when it comes to those class relationships, even when you kind of like go into the matchup, it's not going to tell you, it's going to display like what it usually displays. But when you get into the fight, good is bad and bad is good, if that makes sense. So just keep that in mind, man, that the class relationships for every single fight in Act 5, Chapter 2 are reversed. Now, when it comes to the node that we have in the very first quest here, this one is quite a nice warm-up, and I actually took the wrong path on my free-to-play run. You don't want to take the middle. There's a lot of ambushes here. Instead, you want to go for the left-hand side. Now, the global node here is Power Shield. So this means that your basic attacks are going to deal no damage, but they still generate power, but your special attacks deal 400% more damage. So for this node, you're going to see this as well another time as well in the very next quest. You want to bring champions that deal like a crazy amount of damage and their primary source of damage via their special attacks. So any other characters in your roster you think that their specials hit really hard are going to be amazing for this node. And also champions that do apply damage over time effects off their specials are awesome as well. And even with this node, characters like, for example, like Gwenpool or Wolverine, they still will apply like bleed and damage over time effects on their basic attacks. However, you really want to like scale up the damage with the Power Shield node by using special attacks that hit very hard. So for this quest, this one again is a really straightforward warm-up. You just want to like port over to this Black Panther and Loki and Storm path. So just A here. Really straightforward fights, very easy. And then you want to port over to the middle platform, and then you want to port over to C here. It's a bit weird, man, because these are in a very peculiar order, but C is the best one to go for, because if you go for C, then you need to fight Wolverine and Iron Man to get to Psylocke. So like 6 fights, and you're pretty much done in this one. Like, it is tremendously straightforward and quick, so it's kind of a nice little warm-up there, and no opponents and matchups that are going to be like crazy annoying and just kind of beat you down. So yeah, there's nothing really to worry about when it does come to that first quest there. So that's a kind of a nice little introduction, but don't worry, it's going to get much more challenging. Now for the next quest, we have another Power Shield global. So the global nodes you know, exactly the same as they were previously. However, in this quest, there are a few more challenges. Now, what I would suggest is going for C here, because it's a very short path. I think there's like a Karnak or a Winter Soldier, and then you've got a Juggernaut and a Rhino. The node really isn't that bad. It's just like heavy attacks are not interrupted, so you just need to kind of like parry and play well and just kind of like avoid the special attacks there. It can be a little bit tricky, but again, there are only 3 fights to get to the final boss platform. platform. However, on that platform, you want to make sure you go to B so you avoid the Hyperion and Cable, but you still need to deal with an Iceman, Electro, and the Hood final boss. So probably the worst fight in this one is the Iceman if you're not used to fighting him. So get confident at fighting Iceman. Ideally, if you have kind of a champion that is immune to Cold Snap, now's a really, really great time to bring them. But even if you have other characters, as long as they're fully healed up, you're going to be able to withstand Iceman's Cold Snap, even if you don't get hit there. So yeah, you just got to take him down, take Electro down, and then deal with Hood as well. I think Hood has some slightly annoying stuff. He has, yeah, a lot of power gain. Also, unblockable special too as well. So just take this fight slow and steady. And yeah, it's only 6 fights this one, but the fights are a little bit more tricky. But again, those champions with very strong special attacks are going to be able to absolutely smash this out. And then moving on to quest number 3 in chapter 2. So we've got the Dawn, which is a buffet node here. So buffet is a little bit of an annoying node to fight. It basically means every 7 seconds the next buff triggered by you is immediately nullified, and the defender will regenerate 5% of their maximum health. So ideally you want kind of characters with strong damage output that don't rely on buffs or don't generate buffs here, but even like dashing back and triggering dexterity, that will trigger the buffet node. I would strongly suggest that you take this much shorter path where you have Phoenix, Storm, and Quake, because then it's only 3 fights and you can port to the final boss platform. Phoenix does start with 2 bars of power, and so do all of these 3 here. So it makes the fights a little bit more annoying, but it's only 3 fights, and then you port to the final platform, so it really ain't too bad. And then you've got Unstoppable Colossus and Spider-Gwen. Again, a little bit more annoying to deal with. Spider-Gwen, you want to like parry, 3 combo, rinse and repeat, and then Joe Fixit is going to be like a nice little break from the final boss. He's got like a bit more armor, but that is really it when it does come to Joe Fixit. Nothing too much that you need to worry about. And again, it's only 6 fights to get it done, so it is you know, quite quick and quite straightforward, although the fights are scaling up a bit in terms of difficulty, especially in comparison to what you're used to. But again, just run through it, practice, and just kind of accept that you will die. It's a learning curve, but it's all part of, you know, the MCOC experience there. Now, if you struggle with that chapter, you are probably not going to have a fun time in the next one. So we got Lines in the Sand, and this is where Masochism comes into play, and this is where a lot of people get stuck. I have so many players just messaging me on a daily basis that get stuck in this chapter and they're looking for advice. And again, if you're looking to see how I did this on my free-to-play account with 4-star rank 4 champions kind of around like the low demigod tier, we do have a run through, but I'm going to talk you through all the strategies to deal with Masochism and the path itself. So Masochism is every 7 seconds the next debuff triggered on the champion, so that you trigger on the opponent, is removed, and each time this is triggered they're going to regenerate for 5% of their maximum health. So it's kind of like the alternate version of buffet, that instead of, you know, buffs on you, it's debuffs on the opponent. Now the reason this is so annoying for many players is because a lot of players up until this point will rely on the parry mastery, and this makes parrying like really tricky, because when you go for the parry they're just going to shrug it off and regenerate, and this triggers every 7 seconds. So yeah, it can be a little bit of a pain this chapter, but there are a few kind of methods to dealing with this and solutions. Again, high damage output champions, this is where you really want your hard-hitting characters to get through that regeneration, because even if you are still trying to land the parries, they're going to be regenerating or applying like, you know, debuffs as well. They're going to have a bit of regeneration to contend with. You also want to make sure you're confident at baiting out heavy attacks on the opponent, and also baiting out special attacks, dodging those special attacks and retaliating, because you want to create as many opportunities as you can to go in and nuke the opponent. You also ideally want like heal block champions as well, can be very, very useful. Like Archangel was a friggin' beast for so many fights here. On top of that, champions that reduce ability accuracy can prevent Masochism from triggering. There are certain characters like Proxima Midnight, her parries don't trigger Masochism. You've got like the Sabretooth and Killmonger synergy that can get around Masochism as well. And there's lots of little tips and tricks in all sorts of of characters as well. So definitely use the YouTube search function. There are a lot of guides, a lot of runs through this chapter that have been published as well, so it can be a little bit tricky. But the easiest path, at least in my experience, a lot of people make the mistake of going for the middle, and you don't want to go for the middle because the magic is horrible. She is buffet, a double buffet node of 10%, and also Masochism, and triggers her limbo like crazy. So don't go for the middle. Whatever you do on your first run in this one, because you're not going to have a good time, I would recommend going left-hand side. So Yellow Jacket, he's a good fight to practice on here and can kind of get you used to the Masochism node. So make sure you take a lot of time to kind of practice on this node before you maybe make a full push in this chapter. So just keep that in mind as well. But you've got Yellow Jacket, who's okay to deal with once you get used to him and dodging his special attacks. Then you got Deadpool, pretty straightforward. Colossus, pretty straightforward. Punisher, who can be a bit of a pain. So I always find his special attacks a bit annoying, but he is, you know, relatively straightforward for the most part. Iron Patriot, quite straightforward to deal with. Good what is it, special attacks to just dodge and punish. Iron Man, really straightforward. Another Deadpool as well, just very straightforward to deal with. And then we got War Machine, a bit more annoying. Hulk can be a bit more annoying if you're not confident with those specials. And then we got Loki, who is a bit of a pain as well. Now the final Storm, and this is maybe something to keep in mind, does have a bleed node as well, a Caltrops bleed node. So whenever you dash back, she's going to inflict bleed on you for 6 seconds. So if you're playing like really aggressively, you can technically get this fight down with any champion, and I have done it without bleed immune characters before, but ideally you want some sort of bleed immune champion to take her down. Now she's pretty easy to fight in the Masochism node just because her specials are just you know, very straightforward to deal with, but it's just something to be aware of is that Caltrops node, man, because the bleed can get people stuck. But this is definitely a chapter where you want to make sure you have a 20% booster active while you go for that initial progression, because it is a bit of a fight against the Masochism node, and that 20% booster is really going to help you out. But if you're feeling a little bit beaten down by this chapter, again, take the time to watch some of the runs on YouTube, and just be aware that so many people struggle on this chapter, so you're not alone. You're certainly not alone if you've been having problems with this one, but just take it easy, keep on improving, just keep on practicing, and just do your best to kind of get better at fighting this node and dealing with this chapter. So now you've dealt with Masochism, the next challenge begins, and that is the Bane node. And Bane is a really annoying node at first, but this is definitely a node, the more you fight it and get used to the timing, the easier it becomes to deal with. And when you first go up against it, it's going to seem crazy, but it's just kind of getting into the rhythm of transferring Bane back to the opponent. So the way that the Bane node works is whichever champion hits the other champion first places a Bane debuff on the opponent, and you start to degenerate from the opposing character's current health. It's 2.5% of their current health. So if you get this debuff on you, it's going to be a lot of damage. If it's like right at the start of the fight, it's going to be a crazy amount of damage. You degen very, very quickly. So the goal is to always transfer this debuff like back to the opponent as quickly as possible. And it's kind of just getting that timing like finesse and perfected. There's the real challenge of dealing with Bane. However, there are a few kind of champions and combos that do help you out here. So some of my recommendations, again, you want high damage output champions that can just make the biggest dent in your opponent as quickly as they possibly can, because the quicker you get that health down, even when you do get Bane on you for like a few seconds, like it's just going to reduce the damage you take there. You also need a very aggressive playstyle in this chapter, so you're like keeping on the opponent, keeping them locked down, so you can just constantly transfer Bane back to them. Also, characters with very long special 1 and special 2 animations are very valuable. If Bane's like about to expire on the opponent and come onto you, and you can throw a champion special that's like 2-3 seconds and just has plenty of time during that special animation and all of its hits to transfer, like that's going to be really valuable. So I know it's a bit of a weird one there, but you understand what I mean when you get to the the Bane Chapter. Also, Power Lock and Power Control champions can be super valuable as well, just because if you lock down the opponent's power, you don't need to bait out special attacks, and you can play even more aggressively and have even more windows to transfer Bane, because there are going to be some scenarios where, like, it's just about to expire off the opponent, it goes on to you, and then they throw your special attack, and if it's like Moon Knight special 1, then it's just like a long special to wait out before then you can go in and, you know, transfer it back to him. But also champions that can stun are great for kind of making an interval where you can transfer that Bane as well. But again, Bane is just getting used to the node, kind of getting into the rhythm of it, and I suggest watching some videos and practicing on the Moon Knight a fair bit before you go for a full run, because it does take a lot of getting used to this one. So yeah, looking at the path, you start off with a Moon Knight. He's definitely one of the more annoying champions to fight, and then you want to go over to B here. So then you've got Psylocke, Civil Warrior, pretty easy to fight. Like then we got Iron Fist, Archangel, really straightforward as well. Got a Captain America, nothing too bad to deal with. Black Panther is a little bit more annoying, but just make sure you don't, you know, stun reflect and parry him while he has armor up, and you're good to go there. Then you've got Ronin and OG Thor, very straightforward, and King Groot, just bait out the special 1, easy game, easy life. So yeah, nothing too bad on that path, man. It is like a really, really easy one to deal with, but it's just like the big struggle is just Bane and getting that timing down, and it is gonna slap you in the face at first, so just be prepared for that. And then you've got a Hood, so just bait out special 1, easy game, easy life. And then finally the final boss is a Netflix Daredevil that has, does he have a little bit of regeneration, arc overload? It really isn't too much to worry about, in all fairness. So yeah, that Daredevil boss, he is probably one of the more straightforward bosses, just a really easy Netflix Daredevil to fight, and nothing super special that you need to keep in mind there. But then you are on to the final chapter, the Collector, or the final quest, should I say. So this is where some of the fun begins, man. Well, it's already begun in the Masochism chapter, but this is the peak of the fun, boys, the peak of the fun. So this chapter has the Bane Node again, so if you thought you could escape that node, you were wrong. It is back, and it is even worse in this chapter because the health pools are a little bit bigger, and also the Collector has a ridiculous amount of health, and also Bane as well. So that is really, really, really annoying with the Collector combo. So you want to start off by going to the right-hand side and taking the Kang encounter there. And then you want to port over to E. And then if you go for Angela and Gwenpool, two pretty straightforward matchups there. And then you want to port over to A. So then you're going to go for Venom. He can be a little bit tricky. Old Man Logan, Dr. Voodoo. Then you've got Yondu. You want to make sure on Yondu you always, like, you know, dash back and parry at a distance. Because as long as he has to charge at you with his medium attack and you land that parry, he's not going to inflict bleed. However, if you accidentally like parry him close up and parry a light attack, then he can bleed through the block and absolutely wreck you there. So just make sure you do that. And then we've got Nebula, Gamora, Black Widow and Daredevil, all pretty easy matchups. Black Widow can be a bit annoying with the evade there. However, we got recently buffed Spider-Gwen as the mini-boss, and she's become a little bit more challenging in the last year, but you just want to remember that evade countering tactic of like parry, 3-hit, rinse and repeat, and don't attack her while she is not stunned or you don't have an evade counter. So evade counters are great to bring in here as well. But for the Collector, so the strategy when it comes to the Collector is just the biggest BS fight in the entire game, because there's a lot of stuff going on with the Collector, his special attacks, the Bane Node, his unstoppable. That just makes this guy kind of impossible to properly fight consistently. He's just a massive, massive pain. So your strategy with the Collector is to go in, deal as much damage as you possibly can, as quickly as you can, and then just revive up. That is entirely the strategy there. So basically, you just need characters that immediately go in and have burst damage straight away. You don't want champions that need to kind of get into a matchup and ramp up. So kind of look at your roster, kind of figure out who's best for that, and then focus on just kind of reviving that champion, or ideally bring a team of like, you know, 4 or 5 champions that all kind of have that function of they can go in, they can deal as much damage as quickly as possible before they're going to die to some sort of fun and interactive mechanic. So you don't want champions that rely on damage over time as well, as he's a 50% chance to shrug off debuffs. So characters, again, that have that base burst are super valuable. But the Collector, again, because he's that 50% chance to shrug off, you ideally want to bait out his heavy attacks, which can seem a little bit quick, but he's kind of gonna charge his hands up and then kind of lunge forward, and once you get used to that animation and timing, then he becomes quite straightforward to consistently get about 10 to 25 hits in every single try. And if on every try against the Collector you can get in about 10-25 hits and you've got a good damage output champion, this guy is gonna go down. But it is just a revive fiesta. Like, he's constantly reducing your ability accuracy. He will randomly, when he's lower as well, go unstoppable, and his special attacks, like his special one, is going to be unblockable. I think it's below like 55%. So above that, you can try and block his special attacks, but below that, he's just going to wreck you with like any special attack. Regen's going to pop up. It's not really too much regeneration, so you don't need to worry about it. As long as you've got a decent damage output champion and 20% booster rolling as well, you're going to be having a pretty good time. But make sure you know, just power through the salt here, really. Make sure you have those boosters active, and it is going to be frustrating, but make sure you watch a few videos of the Collector so you have a bit of an idea of what you're in store for. I think one of the best runs to watch probably is my free-to-play run, where I did it with this team as well. So, you know, powered him down with like Electro, the champion, Guillotine, nobody that's like insanely good, but eventually you're kind of just chipping away at this man and he will go down. And this is why I suggest bringing in at least 1,000 units, because sometimes this fight can be very infuriating and make you very salty, because it's just an unfair fight, man. It's just totally rigged, this one, and it just doesn't feel great to do while you're in the middle of it. But as soon as that Collector drops and you get Uncollected, you get all of the upgraded rewards and everything else is buffed up, it's going to feel pretty damn good, because then you can put this guy on the backbench for ages, and there's much better content like past this dude in the end game. So yeah, don't feel bad if the Collector gets you salty, because the fight is 1,000,000% rigged, but just go in, deal as much damage as you can every single time, be a little bit prepared, watch some videos, kind of get used to the special attacks and animations from those videos, so you've got an idea of, you know, what to dodge and when to dodge it. So you should be fine, man. But again, prepare for the salt, boys. The combination of the Collector and Bane is just really not a fun time as well, because there are going to be so many scenarios where you just die from the Bane Node, or like a million other ways that the Collector's just going to kill you. So it's a terrible fight, man. Still to this day, it sucks, but be prepared for a bit of a bad time. But once you got that man down, again, you're Uncollected, you're sorted, it's all in the bin. You can get those upgraded rewards, unlock the Uncollected events, and get on with your life. But ladies and gentlemen, hopefully today's guide has been somewhat useful if you are a progressing player trying to get Uncollected in 2020. Again, it is a big step up from all of the content previously. Act 4 has nowhere near the challenge as some of the early stuff of Act 5, but if you can learn to play and get the basics of this game down, then you're gonna have a really good time getting to Uncollected and also in the future as well. But anyway, hopefully this video guide was useful, and if you did enjoy it, please do smash that like button. That'd be greatly appreciated. Aside from that, thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic day.